Number one is this. Aspies tend to be disconnected from society and its norms. All right, there's this thing called a zeitgeist or a milieu that is society in general, and Aspies tend to be disconnected from that. How does that make Aspies honest? Okay, this is the first of 9 things that we're exploring. Well, I believe that possibly because they're just not influenced by a dishonest society, by that zeitgeist, which tends to be terribly dishonest as people tend to seek out what is best for them. And if being dishonest is best for them, that's what they will be. But there's that disconnect. People with Asperger syndrome are not immersed in that milieu. They're just not there. So they don't pick up on that, let's call it a language. They're not in it, so they don't understand it. It's not part of their norm. Now, what we're doing as we take a look at these 9 suggestions, and they are suggestions, I'm just wondering out loud, why is it that Aspies are so honest? And that's one of the traits of Asperger syndrome, is they just don't lie.
And we found that in this condition, the autistic children were unable to lie.
Okay, there are some exceptions, but by and large, they just don't lie. So as we go through these 9 traits, observations, questions, whatever, suggestions, tell us which ones you agree with. Tell us which ones you see reflected in your life. But here's what I think. I believe that Aspies are born with these traits, and one of those traits being honesty. Actually, I think it's before they are born. Now, I made a video a few months ago that explores the fact that Asperger syndrome is something that develops prenatally. That is to say, before you're born, you're an Aspie. And these traits are just natural. They're part of who you are. But even so, that's not to say that they can't be influenced significantly by society and its norms. So number 1 is because they're just disconnected. Now number 2 may seem to actually contradict number 1, but I think the 2 actually work together. And number 2 is because they actually value friendship. That is to say, Aspies. They value friendship because it is so rare. And we tend to value things that are hard to come by, and things that we crave or things that we need. So let's put it in this perspective. Neurotypical people, at least those that I observe, and I think that you observe as well, tend to have a reservoir of friends. Now, these may be people that you work with, people in your neighborhood, extended family members, but one thing I notice about neurotypical people is they have a circle of friends. Some have a large circle, some have a small circle, but they have a circle of friends. And because they have these friends, they don't value them as much because they have so many. And so many, maybe 3 or 4, where a person with Asperger syndrome may have 0 outside immediate family. So they possibly, and you tell me in the comments if you agree with this, but possibly they want to cling to what friends they have, or at least not drive away potential friends or risk losing friends by lying. I think that's a real possibility. May not be true in every single person with Asperger syndrome, but I think it may be one of the factors we need to consider. Aspies look at it this way. Every friend counts. They have none to spare. Think of somebody who is flat broke except for $2 in his pocket. And this guy's hungry. He's not going to squander those $2, or he's not going to be careless and lose them. He wants to take care of them. He wants to defend them. He wants to grab onto them and hang on to them. Maybe Aspies do the same thing with friends. They have 1 or 2 and they don't want to be dishonest because, well, they could lose their friends. Number 3 is this. And again, this may seem to be a little bit contradictory to what we said before, but number 3 is they value values more than acceptance. Now, can these actually work together? We just said that Aspies love acceptance because it is so rare. I say love, I should say they value it. They value friendships, they value acceptance, but they also value values. That is to say, they have certain principles and they stick to those principles. They cling to those principles because, well, that's just what's right. And in an orderly world, which is a trait of Asperger syndrome, is everything is orderly. In an orderly world, you can't have gray areas. It's got to be black and white. It's got to be clearly indicated. You got to see where the borders are. And one of those borders is with values and principles. So the upside of that is it's very difficult, in my opinion, to brainwash an Aspie. Now that's odd because Aspies are terribly gullible. Now that I say that, Aspies are very gullible, when we talk about a person with Asperger syndrome being honest, that's not to be confused with accuracy. Because somebody can come along to a gullible Aspie, and virtually all of us are painfully gullible, and lie to us, and we will believe the lie. So in our minds, the lie is truth. So we're sticking to this false truth because we're honest, but we're not accurate. In our minds, we're being honest, but inadvertently, we're clinging to a lie. Just throw that out there, something to consider, but people with Asperger syndrome tend to be painfully honest in that they adhere to these principles that they hold dear. That's why you'll find that a person with Asperger syndrome, we said difficult to brainwash, but whatever religion he's with, he'll die for that. Or she, whatever political philosophy she is clinging to, they're very difficult once they get a hold of it. They're very difficult to pull them away. Difficult to brainwash these people. They're not influenced by the media. They're not influenced by society. Large part of that, by and large, is because they're just not in society, but the other part is I think they see through a lot of that. Even though they're gullible, they can see, okay, these people are lying. We don't want to be a part of that. Number 4 is I think Aspies are honest to a fault because, quite frankly, they don't care if you are offended. That's not one of their concerns. If you're offended, so what? Now, if you have Asperger syndrome, you've lived with it all of your life, and one thing you've noticed is that you have been rejected all the time. Doesn't matter where you go, school, work, neighbors, family, you just live a life of constant rejection. You grow accustomed to that. And you find that these people who reject you are not very reliable friends. Why would you care what they think? So I think one of the reasons possibly, and again, give me your opinion, that people with Asperger syndrome tend to be honest is because they're not pressured into taking somebody else's perspective if they know that it's not true. So if you want to fool an Aspie, and again, they're very gullible, if you want to fool an Aspie, you got to kind of go around their back. You can't do it up front in their face because they know better, but they are easily fooled. And that takes us to number 5, which we already kind of touched on, and that is to say that Aspies are accustomed to rejection. So they're not going to agree with somebody who they know is wrong. They're not going to go out on a limb for somebody and lie for them. Well, if they don't, that person is going to reject them. And they're willing to put up with that rejection because they're accustomed to it. And again, I know some of these principles seem to be contradicting each other. On the one hand, they value friendship, so they're going to not risk being dishonest. But at the same time, they don't value that friendship so much that they're willing to be dishonest to retain the friendship. So the friendship has a value to it, but not at the expense of dishonesty. So yes, they want to be your friend, but don't ask them to lie for you, and don't ask them to join in your lie. Now, these are great people. Aspies are great people to have around, say at church, whatever, because, or at the workplace, wherever you happen to be, because when they hear gossip and slander and religious context, they call it murmuring. I don't like that term, but that's what they use, and they hear this, and by and large, they don't participate because, they just have this sense of what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is not true. So they don't follow that crowd. Very, very loyal people because of that. So number 5 is they're accustomed to rejection. Number 6 is they just don't expect to be liked. Now this is one of the challenges that every Aspie faces, is that thing where you just know when you move into a social context, people are just not going to like you. Sometimes it's like that you feel like that you are hated on first sight. You've heard of love on first sight. A lot of people with Asperger syndrome feel like they're just hated on first sight. And so they stay away from social settings because why bother? They're not going to like us anyhow, so why even go in there? It's just going to be miserable. And some of that, I think, is attributed to just imagination, but on the other hand, some of that is very, very real. And if you have Asperger syndrome, you can attest to that. You walk into a crowd and they look at you and this guy's weird. And immediately you are rejected. So people with Asperger syndrome don't expect to be liked. So they're not going to lie just to be liked because they're not liked anyhow. They got nothing to lose. I think you understand what I'm talking about there. Number 7 is this. They expect to accept responsibility. Now, here is a principle that you need to stop and pay attention to. May even want to write this one down. But a person with Asperger syndrome, well, let's rephrase that. Let's say a person with character would rather be caught in a truth than caught in a lie. And if you tell a lie, there's a good chance you're going to get caught. But if you tell the truth, everything coincides, corroborates truth. Everything does. So, there's just a lot less to worry about if you're honest. So, why lie? Why would you even do that? You expect to accept responsibility for what you say and what you believe. And if somebody wants to disagree with you, and you're a person with Asperger syndrome, you're willing to take the heat. Some people wonder out loud, and on this channel I don't talk about politics, I don't talk about religion, because there is such a diverse community within the spectrum of Asperger syndrome, so I just avoid those things altogether. But when we are in that mode of religion or politics or social opinion or whatever, when we find ourselves in that, we are prone to be pulled one way or the other by something that just doesn't jive with reality. And we don't go that direction. We just hold the course because this is the right way to go. Okay, here's a good example, I think. Let's say that people with Asperger syndrome tend to be technological thinkers. All right, so you got, say you got a lawnmower engine. And here's how a lawnmower engine works. And a person with Asperger syndrome or anybody with common sense can see that. That's just how it works. Then along comes somebody and they says, if you put water in the gas tank, that's a lot cheaper than gasoline, and it may run it a little rough, but it's a whole lot cheaper, and, go ahead and try it. I can't think of a single person who would be duped by that. Certainly not an Aspie, even though Aspies could be, but they understand how the mechanism works, so they're not going to be fooled. Very, very odd thing, because Aspies, again, tend to be so gullible. But some things, when they conflict with reality, that's why you have to go around behind their back. They see through it. They see through it. So when somebody tries to debunk their religion or their ideology or their politics or their social views, they don't buy it. They can see through it. They know that an engine works this way. That's just how it works. And you tamper with it, you're going to break it. You put water in the gas tank. No, I don't believe you. You're lying. The truth is, gasoline engines run on gasoline. Diesel engines run on diesel. Can't switch them. Can't put gas in a diesel engine. Can't put diesel fuel in a gas engine. I mean, that's so very obvious, but this is the way they approach life in general. It's all mechanical. Again, as we said earlier, it's all black and white, cut and dry, in or out, yes or no. It's all technology. And when people try to fool them, got to take that backstabbing approach because they're going to see through it and they're very honest. And when you disagree with them, you can be very frustrated because they're going to take the straight and narrow path every single time with very few exceptions. So they expect to accept responsibility. And number 8, we kind of got ahead of ourselves, but number 8 is they think mechanically rather than emotionally. So if you want to appeal to a person with Asperger syndrome, my best suggestion for you that I could think of is do not try to appeal to their emotions. Now, I understand that people with Asperger syndrome are very rich in affective empathy. Now, in cognitive empathy, they're just bankrupt. But in affective empathy, they are very affectionate people. But still, when it comes between affection and reality, they can usually tell the black and white hard edge difference. Because they tend to think, I call it mechanically, they tend to think black and white. So they are just honest. And if that bothers you, well, sorry, but reality is what reality is. Now, I take that principle. Here's something else you might want to write down. I take that principle and I reduce it to the ridiculous, and I just say, is. That's it. Is. Believing the earth is round or flat has no bearing on its roundness or flatness. It just is what it is. It just is what it is. Up is up and down is down, and if you want to believe something else, go right ahead, but it is what it is, regardless of what you believe. Finally, number 9 is this. One of the reasons I think that contributes to an Aspies honesty is flat affect. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? Now, we talked about emotions that Aspies tend not to be, even though we have affective empathy, we don't tend to be emotional. But what does that have to do with honesty? Well, it has this to do with it. People with Asperger syndrome don't get rattled. See, there's more to flat affect than meets the eye. That poker face, they have a poker body. They don't give those tells. They just sit straight still, other than fidgeting, what most people call fidgeting. We call it stemming, but aside from that, they pretty much they don't give away a whole lot in their. They don't hand gesture a lot. I do, but most people with Asperger syndrome, they do hand gesture, but not as much as other people. They do have facial expressions, but not as much as others. Neurotypical people, and that is because there is more than meets the eye. It's not just that they're still. It is because people with Asperger syndrome simply are not easily rattled. Now, that goes back to what we were talking about before. Thought reform, being brainwashed, being influenced politically or socially or religiously. A lot of times people will try to influence others by rattling them. There is danger ahead. You got to vote for this guy. There is danger ahead. You need to get out of that religion, come to this religion or whatever. Try that with an Aspie, and what you get is a flat effect. You get a dead stare. You will get sorry, but no, I'm not buying it. Why? Because, well, they're just honest. Part of their makeup. Okay, those are the 9 things. Let me know, what do you think? In that video we mentioned, are people with Asperger's syndrome born that way? You want to watch that video. See those two rectangles on the screen? Click on those so you can keep this going. You don't have to stop here. We got a whole lot more to talk about. We got hours to talk about.